Hi everyone, my name's Molly, I'm an alcoholic. Wow. Oh, this is really an honor to get to speak here, but it's very scary. I'm so afraid you're going to start moving around and I'm going to have to be the mother and start pounding on the thing. And I did a lot of my growing up in the original rodeo. There was a guy named Aaron. He probably took his cake here last week. He now lives in Mammoth. And he lied from the podium last week at Ohio Street. He took his cake and he reminded us that his girlfriend had gotten mad when he took his cake at rodeo because she got drunk and she didn't have the time he did. So he said this. He said she threw a pie in his face. And everybody, oh, poor. But it was me. She missed him and she hit me. And I wanted so much to stand up and say, you're lying. But I thought, no, let it go. But I remember, in his grandiosity, he said, oh, we'll pay for your new dress to be, cleaned. He never did. But anyway, what I have learned about AA is that we are all nuts. We learn behavior here so that we can act as if we know what we're doing. But really, you strike some chord in us, and each of us has a place where we are totally nuts. I was looking around the group. I go to Ohio Street on Sunday. And it's made up a lot of old timers like me, ladies, and I was looking around and I was so judgmental. My God, I hate a lot of these people. And then I thought, maybe you better just change your attitude. Maybe you better see that you're as nuts as the rest of the people you're criticizing in your head. And that was kind of growth for me. I spoke a couple of days ago at an early morning meeting in the marina, and it was on the 6th step. And one of the things about the 6th step, they read it there, and I realized that it's about don't gossip, and I had gossiped so much before I even spoke. I thought, oh my God. Gossip makes us feel better about ourselves and that we're better than you, but there's a great, great healing power in gossip. So anyway, it's going to be hard for me to get off. And somebody, before I get into my story, somebody who took a cake talked tonight about that terror that he had slipped a couple of times, and that terror in his stomach. And I think it's very hard for us to get in touch with our feelings. When I was very new, I was at Ohio Street. Also, I seem to have all my breakthroughs at Ohio Street. I was at Ohio Street, and I had this new leather coat that my mother had given me. And my sponsor was sitting here, and this drunk was sitting next to me, and he poured his coffee on my coat, my new leather coat. And I didn't know if I was supposed to look for some sort of spiritual meaning in the shape of the stain, or if I was supposed to pray for him, or if I was mad. And I said to my sponsor, look what he did to my coat. And she said, you're mad. So then, I turned on him. Ah! But often, I have 34 years of sobriety. Even now, a lot of times, I don't have any idea how I feel. And one of the great things about AA is that we can come here feeling rotten and pull ourselves out, or we learn tricks here so that we can get back to even. Because our minds, in my opinion, are always out to get us back to, oh, I can take a pill, oh, I can take a drug, oh, I can take just one little drink. Anyway, I was doing this business thing the other day, and I curated this art show, which you're all invited to on La Cienega. And it was a whole season of work, and I was working with people I really didn't get along with so well. I like them now that the thing is up and hung, but we were having a lot of problems. That it's hard to be a team player when you're in my opinion, often when you're sober alcoholic. And these people who run this place, I introduced them to somebody, and they went off to meet him and left me out, and I just went crazy. So for once, I stood up for myself, and I said I'd like to be included in that invitation that you forgot to leave me in. And driving there by myself to meet these people, my stomach was just churning so much that I really thought a drink would help. Now, I know after 34 years of sobriety, I'm not going to drink, particularly when I'm speaking at rodeo. I'm just not going to blow it. But the pain that I felt in my stomach was so strong, and I realized that's growing up. It's acknowledging that you're very, very uncomfortable. But in order to grow up, you have to live through a lot of stuff like that. And that's what I've been lucky enough to be able to do. The pain has never gotten so bad that I've had to take a drink. but I've come pretty close, and I am so grateful to be here and to be alive. My mother, who was, my parents were really nice people, but it was a paraphrase on the song from Showboat, in that my mom was rich and my dad was good looking. And my father, he had his funeral upstairs here about 15 years ago, and then my mother had her funeral upstairs about 4 years ago. And she gave so much money to this church so that she would get to heaven. And my brother and I are still angry. Why didn't we get it? You know, this church got, and they put right in, so I feel like I'm sort of, it's okay that I'm here, you know, and I'm... Anyway, I grew up in a really nice family. My mother was a professional do-gooder in that she supported every charity in Los Angeles, and when she was rebuilding the Good Samaritan Hospital, raising money, our house ran like a hospital. When she was the president of the alumni of the Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority, our house, we had lockout, and we had dinner at 5:45, and whatever involved charity she was involved with, that's the way our family ran. My father was in show business. He was a story editor at Paramount, and had come from a small town in the South. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He fell in love with my mother, and they stayed married, which I was very lucky and grateful for. But our family, my father was a very, very strict disciplinarian, and he would say at dinner, you know, what did you do today, and then begin to criticize your language. And I don't know if any of you had families like that, but it makes you want to drink before you're 4. I mean, you know, anything to get out of those god-awful dinners. And we'd have a big flower arrangement, you know, on the table, the dining room table, so I couldn't see my brother, and my father would just be issuing orders. And my mother was a real good Al-Anon. She was never at all swayed by his, you know, bad temper or his rage or anything. Across the street from where we lived, there was an Italian family, and I was invited there for dinner. They didn't have that big centerpiece, and there were 5 boys and 2 girls, and they were having fun. And I made it a vow when I was in high school that I would marry an Italian and have 5 kids, which I now do. And that proves, that proves that you can achieve anything here if you're really willing to put in the time. Anyway, I went away. My first drink, I was 14. I went to a drive-in, which was across from Hollywood High. It was a Tiny Nailers. And I was going to a girls' school, and my girlfriend and I were dating 2 boys from Harvard Military Academy, and the boy in the front passed around a flask of scotch, and my whole life changed. I became the life of the car. They laughed at my jokes. My pimples disappeared, and I was really comfortable in my own skin for the first time in my life. And I've thought at that time, and I can still remember the feelings, I will use this alcohol as my medicine until I die. I've been sober now. I've been in AA longer than the first half of my life. But it was a very chaotic life, and I accomplished a lot because I was drunk all the time, so I was absolutely fearless. I found that you come in here and you come either to get a lifestyle back that you lost, or you come here to get a lifestyle, period, which is really what I did, because I started drinking when I was so young. And I was a wild person. I got through high school drinking as often as I could. My dates would come to pick me up and just drop me off at my parents' house. Not, you know, never to be seen again, but just, you know. And I remember going to a lot of garden weddings, which we did at this girls' school. We never learned anything about how to work. We learned how to pour tea, how to go to weddings. And I remember going to these garden weddings, you know, where they'd have the astroturf or the grass outside, and I would fall. My heel would always catch, and I would fall over. And no one would come to help me. They'd just back off. You know, that's Molly. Let's get away from her. Anyway, I went away to Berkeley, and I pledged my mother's sorority. And they took me because I had to. I was a legacy, and my mother really, really campaigned to get me in there. But I was the kind of person they always kept away from the newcomers because I was always drunk and always in trouble. I came down to breakfast one day in the Kappa house, and I looked at the Daily Californian, and the headline, one of the small headlines said, "Co-ed leads auto chase through the streets of Berkeley. 7 police cars required to stop her," and it was me. And I still have that article to remind myself, you know, that it wasn't just a little light table wine that got me here. I got out of Berkeley and I went to New York and I met a man on the plane who I later married because he was glamorous. What we were trained to do at my school, my mother really set the standard. We were trained to marry savings and loan vice presidents. Most of them are in jail now, but at that time it was a really, that was what we were supposed to do. And my mother was always trying to arrange dates for me with the sons of savings and loan presidents or vice presidents. And anyway, I found this guy on an airplane, and he was much, much older than I was, and he was very glamorous, and he was the vice president of a network. So I thought, well, that'll please her. The fact that he had been married so many times, and in my opinion was an alcoholic, and not a good choice for a husband. But to me, he represented freedom, and I married him. He lived in New York, and I moved to New York. I got into the art business then, which I'm still in. The art world was really thriving, and we had a beach house out in Long Island. It was a really glamorous life, but the best part of it was that everybody, in my opinion, was a drunk. I mean, we drank for every occasion, and the artists, had no real, they had been ostracized and had not made it well, and so the drinking was a real excuse and also a way of life for the artists. Oh, hell, so-and-so died, Jackson died, let's have a drink. People were always dying in automobile accidents because we were all loaded, but it was a perfect kind of life for me. When my first husband was transferred out here, I opened a gallery on La Cienega. A lot of you came there, a lot of you drank there, a lot of you passed out there. I remember one guy, I used to have these weird artists, because we all drank the same, and I never paid much attention. I liked the art, but I mean, my main thing was, were they good drinkers, were they good looking? And I found this one guy in South Africa, and I had him, and he wanted to do portraits of people. I asked Aloma to pose for him, and but it wasn't the face he wanted, it was the crotch. And I can't remember what happened, but I just remember that was the style of the place I was running. I remember somebody saying once, and I heard them when they came in the front door of the gallery, she has the best bar in town, and I thought, oh my God, no. They've said it wrong, it's the best gallery. No, they meant the best bar. I always thought you needed alcohol to sell art, and upstairs I had an on-team gallery which was filled with drug addicts. And people were up there, saying their little mantras, and they were all very thin, and they were doing their little paintings and smoking drugs. And I was going up and down trying to figure out where I fit in. Anyway, I guess I qualify as an alcoholic. I lived up on Yoakum Drive. Anybody ever live up there? It's a street for people that are either about to go to Betty Ford or get a hit TV series or join AA and get out of there, And I moved up there. I had 2 kids. I was getting divorced from my first husband, and we had moved back to LA. And my house was black. It took 55 steps to get into it. And then there was a sort of a trap door, and I bought that house so nobody could see what I was doing with my life and with my drinking. The last night of my drinking, I was up in this house looking for something to do. My car was in the shop for a drunken accident. I'd lost my license for drunken driving. My house was painted black. I mean, I bought this house. I liked it because nobody could get in easily, but also the lady she was an artist. She'd made these life-size dolls, so I had friends in the living room. Anyway, the last night of my drinking, I was up there in this house, and I was waiting for something to happen, and my neighbor across the street, Curtis, who was a male model who was later murdered, called me and said he was having a dinner party. A lot of you have heard my story. And he said his stove was broken, and could I cook the casserole? He'd bring it over in the afternoon and then take it over to his party. And I said, sure. And then he said, Molly, please don't drink when you're here. Because, and I said, Curtis, you make it sound like I'm an alcoholic. And he said, well, Molly, you've set fire to my house before. I just assume you didn't drink while you're here. So I remembered I had left a burner on once when I was house sitting, and the wall had caught on fire. And I remember a number of houses, 2 other houses, that I'd had that same problem. And so I said, okay, Curtis, I won't drink. It's funny, we were invited to a party. This is like 30, 4 years later, a couple of months ago in that same house, and it was so lovely. And I just went around taking pictures to remember all the details, you know, going from this horror of that last night of drinking to what our lives are like today. Anyway, I took his little casserole over, his little tuna surprise, and all his guests were going into the dining room, and they left this big coffee table. It was like a hunting lodge, this house. And there were all the drinks left, and then over in the corner was a bar. And I went in and presented him with his little casserole, and then they all went in, and he said, have one glass of wine and let yourself out. He didn't say to me, you know, stay for dinner. And it was my ego. You know, we're so grandiose, coupled with lack of self-worth. I thought he doesn't want me to compete with him for the attention. No, he was afraid I'd faint or pass out. But anyway, they all went into dinner, and they left me alone. I had my one glass of wine he'd promised, and then I could not get out of that room till I drank everything. I went around the room, the coffee tables, you know, just drinking everything. Went over to the bar, just started drinking right out of the glass, the bottles. And I thought at that time, if Cary Grant were here, he never would have ever been in that party or on Yoakum Drive. But if he had been there and invited me to go to the movies, I would have had to say no. Because once I started drinking, I just couldn't stop. It was like every night I went through the same ritual. Every morning I would have to go down and buy more liquor. Every night the same thing. And I would order more liquor when my car was, when my license was taken away. The liquor store man would come every night, and he would stay until I passed out. I mean, it was crazy the way I was living. But anyway, this last night hit me. You're an alcoholic. You can't stop. And I left Curtis's house loaded, as always, but I went home, finished everything in the house, and made a vow to call AA the next morning. I had the number on my bulletin board, so the next morning I woke up, and I thought maybe I was a little... maybe a little bit strict on myself. Maybe my feelings that I was an alcoholic are false. But I did call AA, and I said to the woman, I have a friend who's an alcoholic. And she said, let me send you the material, honey, and you give it to your friend. And the miracles began to happen. I think once we hit it in our heads for a period of time that we're alcoholics and nothing can change that, we're willing to do anything. You know, they say, oh, don't talk rudely. Don't tell the person to shut up and sit down. But if we're ready, we'll do anything we can to ensure that we will have a comfortable kind of sobriety. Anyway, I called the woman. She sent me the material. I had it in my head I wasn't going to drink that day. I was going to wait for her. And the miracles began to happen. I have goosebumps right now thinking about what happened. That night I took my kids. I was driving without a license, but I took my kids to Century City to buy their school clothes. And I took them to the cafeteria, Clifton's, and it turned out that the guy was in AA that owned that place. And I went there because they didn't serve alcohol. And we were having our dinner, and Aloma came in. And she was my daughter's brownie troop leader. And she always looked like Camp Beverly Hills. She had her little tilted cap and her little outfit, and she was happily married, and she had a beautiful house. And she was just the absolute opposite of the way I was living. At least I thought so. And so anyway, she came in with her 2 kids, and they were the same age as my kids, and they all went to school together. And she sat down with me, and she said, I've just joined AA. And I've still never asked her, even though I should after this meeting, if she knew that, you know, what a mess my life was. But she just sat down with me and started talking about AA. She had 12 days of sobriety, so she didn't really know too much, but she just blah, 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 blah. We talked for 3 hours, and I said, I've called for help this morning. I'm one too. And my 2 big concerns when Aloma let me talk that night, I had 2 reasons I didn't think I was ready for AA. The first one was, now look, you'll see how really driven I am when I get an idea. I wanted to marry again, and I wanted an Italian husband. And I was afraid that I would have to go to Italy to find him, and that if I didn't have wine, I wouldn't be lubricated enough to pursue him. So I said, Aloma, would it be okay if I drank out, when I go to Europe? And she said, no, you're not going to drink. Slips out of the country count, but let's not even think about that now. And my second question was, when my daughter marries, I feel it would be a Christian tradition that it would be so important to me to have a glass of champagne. I feel it would be an insult to this church where we are tonight to this church if I couldn't have one glass of champagne to celebrate my daughter's marriage. And she said, no, you can't drink at your daughter's marriage, but your daughter's only 9. So that was it. Everything else sounded fine to me. And Aloma said, don't drink this weekend. She was going out of town. This was a Friday. She said, I'll pick you up Tuesday and take you to a meeting. I sat on my hands all weekend. I didn't drink, but I took every drug, every diet pill, everything I could find, and just waited for Aloma. I went out for her, to pick me up on Tuesday night, and there was this American Airlines, we've heard this before, the fantasy is AA, they've sent the plane for me, the grandiosity again. But Aloma picked me up with, in her little AA van, and there were 5 women in the car, all of whom are still sober today. Joan was in the car, Janie, and they've all stayed sober, and I think the reason for that is that they got out of themselves and helped other people. I think that's really the trick here, is if we think too much about ourselves, we get into trouble, because our minds, as I said before, in my opinion, are out to get us. So the trick to break that is to get into service, get busy, start thinking about other people, find a newcomer, find somebody just to get out of yourself and be a part of the solution. And that's what I was aware of that night. I hated everybody in that car. They were all having fun. They were all doing girly little talks. I had no idea how to talk to them. I just sat there and sulked. And we got to the meeting, 2+2 of Westwood, and I felt I loved them and I loved everybody in the room. I felt I'm home. There were 5 people I knew in the room. 2 I'd known from the PTA, 2 I'd known from the art world, and 1 lady I'd gone to high school with. And I thought she was dead, and there she was. She really looked young. That's good for us here, too. We get so we're middle-aged, but we look pretty good, Anyway, life has gotten better for me every year. The first year, I knew right away to get a strong sponsor. I got a woman named Jeannie J. She wasn't the kind of person that I would ever go to, well, she wouldn't want to go to the movies with me or anything, but I didn't want to hang out with her. I just wanted her wisdom. She always had an answer for everything. She sponsored about 95 people, but she always had time to give you her wisdom, and it was always whatever she was working on herself. You could always go to her house and just sit and listen to her. I didn't really know how to talk very well when I got here, but she gave me certain rules. She said, you never say no to an AA request. One time after she told me that, I was at Roxbury, and some guy asked me to pose for a bra ad. I was thrilled. I was so thrilled. I said, Jeannie, that guy asked me to pose for an Olga bra ad. She said, that's not an AA request. But she really, laid it out. We don't run away a day at a time. We get a commitment at least once a week. We sit in the front. We take any job we're asked to do. We pick up newcomers. We wash cups. We greet. We take a commitment so that we won't run away. Even if you hate the meeting, the prude in us, sober alcoholics, will keep us going back if we have a commitment. Otherwise, we tend to say, oh, I don't have to go to that meeting. I think I'll just watch another rerun of Law and Order. I don't have to go, But if we have a commitment, we will show up. And that is the trick that really saves us. She told me to say, she said, you have to be a host. Well, she never said have to, but it was, you'd lose her if you didn't do what she said. She said, you have to have a commitment at the AA Roundup, which is now the AA Powwow. And she said, you'll be a hostess there. They're going to ask you to be a hostess. And I got there to this, and we have to wear these little mini skirts, these little green outfits. This is in June. And I got there, and she said, now you have to go to the hostesses meeting at 10 tonight. And I thought, well, I'll be drunk then. And then I thought, oh, no, I don't drink anymore. And I got there, and Gail Wilson, who a lot of us knew, were the head of the hostesses, and it was in her room. We had this meeting. There were about 15 of us that were hostesses. It was supposed to be a great honor. And I walked in, I saw these people, and I thought, oh, my God, I'm going to be stuck with these people all my life. And I burst out crying. And then again, I realized, yeah, you're going to be stuck with them. You better get to like them. And another, adjustment, which would constantly, we really do have to be open to change here. Flexible to change. I remember once I went to see an artist in New York to try to show him, sign him up for a show, and Jeannie told me to go. And I got there, I took the red eye, and I got there, and I called the guy, and the line was busy, and I took the next plane back. I took a cab to her house, and she said, what are you doing here? You went to New York last night. I said, I couldn't stay. She said, that's all right. You had $217, 2 meals, 2 movies, you didn't drink, and next time you'll be able to do it. Much later, I was invited, 4 or 5 years later, I was invited to that artist's house for dinner in East Hampton, and it was the biggest honor of my life. The guy was famous, he was the best artist I'd ever known, and I was really thrilled. And I got to this dinner, there were 5 of us, and the maid was serving, and they were talking French, and they were all bragging, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, in order to keep up with these people, they're so intellectual, I'm gonna have to drink here. But then I remembered there was a meeting in Amagansett, and I got in my car and raced to Amagansett. They were just breaking for, the coffee break. And I said, I'm at a dinner, and I want to drink, and I don't know what to do, and they all gave me suggestions. And so I got in my car and went back to the dinner. I was gone about 20 or 30 minutes. And I walked in, nobody noticed I was gone. And I learned then, you have to take care of yourself. So if you have to go to a dinner party, my experience has been you go just before the dinner is served, so you don't have to get into all the drinking. And if you have to go to a cocktail party for work or for some reason, you go in the beginning, make a lot of noise, let them all know you're there, and then get out. Because we are people who are so easily seduced into being liked that we will do anything. The first art opening I had at my gallery after I got sober, Billy Boyle came to support me. He brought a crowd of people. They were going to hear him speak at Wilshire, Normandy, and some drunk poured, wine on Billy. And he had to go speak, reeking of wine. But that's what we do for each other. We come, we support. Often we're not able to take care of ourselves or do for ourselves what we should, but other people will fill in and help us. So I think if I can leave you with anything tonight, I think this is the greatest spiritual movement in the world. I think people that go to church they're people that don't want go, they don't want to go to hell. That's what my mother was trying to do, avoid hell. But we are people who have been to hell, so nothing scares us. We can act normal. We have been there. We know what it's like. So in conclusion, I want to thank Jerry. It's such an honor to get to speak here, and you really do find out when you speak what you think, and nobody can interrupt you. You just blah, 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 blah. And hopefully, if you are new, stick around. I've gotten everything. I've got a profession that I love. I got my Italian husband after 15 or 20 years. We found each other at a singles party, and he said, I've seen you in AA, and I said, God, if this guy doesn't have a serious mental illness, let me have him. And I couldn't have gotten married any earlier. I used to fall in love with these guys in AA, 3 months. They'd leave, and I'd think, oh, I'm going to die. And a month later, I couldn't even remember who they were. And one of them's still in prison. So that would have pleased my mother. Anyway, thank you so much for asking me to speak.